So this is an extended cut of the interview that I did with the UFC fighter and commentator Dan Hardy. It's part of the first episode of the second series of Modern Masculinity. There's a link to that if you haven't watched it already. But he said so many interesting things that I really wanted to share with everybody else. So we made this 10-minute clip and I hope you guys enjoy it. Are you okay, hon?
Everyone watching this is going to think I don't know how to use a spoon. Why is she talking to this guy? He's not even figured out cutlery.
So I went to open workouts yesterday. Masvidal brought people from the audience onto the stage, like random people. Like, that doesn't happen usually, right?
No, not normally. More than anything, it's an opportunity for the fans to interact with the fighters. But the trend of not doing open workouts is quite a new one, though.
I guess so many of the fans watch this kind of living vicariously through the fighters, and then that's an opportunity.
It's being on that stage, feeling what it's like to stand on that stage and be that person for that moment. Like those guys coming up to body spar in front of Masvidal, it's like I am trying to prove myself to him. It's almost like you're being recruited as one of his guys, you know. There's something about Masvidal and Diaz, they're tribal leaders, and that's where their energy is different, because like people would follow them to battle, and that's the energy they put off, and that's because, I mean, they're magnetic, they're controversial, but they're very, very real.
You use the word tribal, you talk about going into battle, you talk about like being recruited, and it's so interesting because I'm like, okay, I keep hearing the word like alpha male thrown around as well. So all these words, like, they basically explain why I'm so interested in UFC for this specific series around masculinity. What is it about this that you think appeals to so many men across the board?
But every man, as we're talking about masculinity, falls on that spectrum of wild animal, civilized human being. And we all fall somewhere on that spectrum. And some of us have got a bit more wild animal than others, and that wild animal needs to manifest in some ways. And a lot of the time, my negative perspectives of that manifesting is drinking, is football violence, is gangs, is, you know, bullying, you know, picking fights with people that can't defend themselves as a way of kind of charging that up. This is why martial arts is important for me, because it allowed me to step into a space where it was safe to be a bit of an animal. It was safe to identify with that anger and that conflict within me that I needed to channel something into something. Had I not channeled it into mixed martial arts, I don't know how it would have manifested, probably quite negatively.
But when you're talking about like having like that wild animal or like that kind of, you know, that side of you that might be prone to, I guess, looking for a fight or whatever, where does that come from? Is that, I don't know, is that something that, where did you grow up? Like, is that something that is partially where you're from?
I think a part of it. I think a part of it is it's your environment, it's your upbringing, it's your parents, it's their characteristics that come through you as a child. I think a lot of it is how you manage and interact with fear in the first few years of your life. Like you always find like boxers and combat sports athletes and that. Nate Diaz, for example, from Stockton, California. So from a very young age, he would have been in circumstances where he would have felt threatened, he would have felt afraid, he would have felt like he had to defend himself, to look after himself. So then this is where I don't feel like the brain develops in the same way as every individual. Because you've got three different parts of the brain. The reptilian brain is the part that's going to develop most if you're in a dangerous environment. So if you grow up on the streets of Stockton and you're having to fight for your life, you know, a couple of times a week, the reptilian brain is going to develop more because it's more relevant to the environment you're born in. Whereas if you're born in Beverly Hills and you've got everything you need, the reptilian brain's not going to develop as much, which means the new mammalian brain and the old mammalian brain are going to allow it to flourish a bit more, which makes us less combative and less aggressive. It's like when we see fighters coming out of like Russia and Dagestan, like they've had a hardened childhood, so they're closer to the reptilian brain, so they're more likely to want to fight, more likely to need a space for that part of their personality to manifest, and naturally makes them more combative.
If I think of like the first fighters that come to my head, I've got McGregor, Habib, and probably Masvidal, like the three that come to my head when I think of them. You've got the Cuban American, like from Miami, Habib. I mean,
Dagestani, like lives in the mountains and very hard in life.
Conor McGregor.
I mean, it's the same with all combat sports. You know, I mean, Mike Tyson's a good example. Like, he was bullied. He was bullied. He was. I mean, a lot of his early childhood experiences were very negative. You know, him, you know, living with his mum and not, you know, being poor, not having anything that he needed to basically feel like safe and comfortable. So he developed fear-based programming when he was a kid, and that manifested as being one of the most terrifying boxers that's ever lived in our time.
Where does your story come into play with, I guess, this stuff?
Well, I mean, I'm from Nottingham. My mum and dad are still together. They had me when they were young. They were 17 when I was born. So, like, I mean, I didn't have a particularly terrible childhood, not at all. Most of my interactions outside of the house were the more traumatic ones, I would say. At school, you know, walking to and from school, the reason I got into martial arts was because I was being bullied. So that was like 5, 6 years old. So a lot of my interactions it was fear-based programming. The reason I wanted to prove myself as a fighter was to make myself feel safe. That was where it initially came from. It was a self-defense mechanism. I wanted to be able to feel like I could walk into any environment and not feel vulnerable to the people there. From that circumstance, there are 2 ways I could go. I could either become the bully and want to control the environment out of fear and make everybody else feel uncomfortable to make me feel better, or I could go the way that I did fortunately go, which is to understand that I am capable and I don't need to impose myself on other people and make them feel uncomfortable to make me feel safe.
When you talked about the reptilian brain stuff, where did you learn about that?
I think the first time I heard about it was there's a book called Dragons of Eden by Carl Sagan. So the reptilian brain is we've got to look after ourselves. We're the priority. I'll climb over everybody else in this room to make sure I get what I need to stay alive. Like, we are the most important thing on the planet. So that's the first development of the brain. Then you've got the old mammalian brain, which is the next development of the brain, where we realize that, well, in order for me to look after myself, if we work as a group, ultimately I'm going to always benefit, because if you've got food, then we've got food. Yeah. The next stage up from that is the new mammalian brain, which is where I realized that I can be completely altruistic. And this is a new development, really, in the past, I don't know, few hundred years. And this is me going, well, I've got food and I'm all right, so you can have the food and I can go without. And that's me being comfortable in doing that. The reptilian brain is going, hell no, don't do that. Keep the food full for yourself, because what if we starve? And the old mammalian brain is well, we'll share the food. The new mammalian brain is, you can have all the food. And like, because you've got 3 different developments in the brain, they've all got different opinions on what's going on. So like, if I step into a fight environment and I've got 3 conversations going on in my head, the first conversation is the reptilian brain going, I'm going to destroy this guy. This guy's got no chance. He can't beat me. The old mammalian brain is going, oh, my sister's watching, my mum's watching. How are they feeling? Are they nervous? Are they anxious? Are they afraid? The new mammalian brain is going, do I really want to punch this guy in the face? He's got kids. How are his kids going to feel if I do damage to him? So like, all of this cross chatter that's going on in the brain, that's when a fighter will say, I was overthinking things. And I don't think necessarily they always understand what they mean when they say that, but the overthinking is that cross chatter in the brain. It's the opinions that go against each other.
Why is it suddenly gone quiet?
Face-offs.
Does that mean they just look at each other?
Yeah, just look at each other. See, these are interesting moments, the face-offs, because this is the first time they'll get to have a real good look in someone's eye.
I just want to see what's going on over there, and then we can come back and sit down. There's so much in this that makes me think of the Fight Club thing. It's like people are kind of going through their daily lives. They've got jobs they don't really like. They're going through a whole system, where they're like, I don't really have much control and I don't feel in touch of, like, I guess who you are as a human, right?
That's exactly it. It's and like, you look at Nate Diaz or Masvidal, and a lot of the people sitting watching, they'll never be that person. They'll never allow themselves to be that person. They'll never be the guy that walks out on stage and lights up a CBD joint, and when they shouldn't. They won't break the rules. But when they see somebody else doing it, there's a little bit of power that they get from that. It's that Fight Club thing. It's like you're not on the side of the businessman. You're on the side of them blowing up the banks at the end of the movie, right? You're not actually going to do that in real life, but you want to be a part of that rebellious. Do you know what I mean? That
is actually, I guess, really part of it. Is I feel like a lot of guys just feel like there's so many rules now, and I feel like there's like a general frustration that people get, and this kind of provides an outlet.
It does. I think that the best way for me to understand it is that there's a purity to it, which you don't get in a lot of other things. And this goes for all of the sports as well. You've got 2 guys that are basically stripped down to pretty much nothing in a cage, in an arena where we've got somewhere between 6 and 10 million people watching them. and all they have is their wits and their speed and their ability to keep themselves safe against each other. Like there's no sport in the world that's as pure as that. You might lose money if you lose at golf. You might lose respect if you lose at rugby. You know what I mean? You might lose teeth if you lose at MMA. I'm here, I'm putting myself on the line. That's how confident I am as myself and an individual.
Yeah.
And I think people also don't have that interaction with confidence on a daily basis as much as that. You know? I think when they see that in other people, there's a confidence that they get from them for themselves.
The BMF title is on the line. The doctor's waving it off.
No way.